All right, folks, let me call the meeting to order. Thank you for joining us this evening, our first meeting in 2019. This is a regularly scheduled Greer City Council meeting called and convened this evening, January the 8th, 2019. Having called the meeting to order, I'd like to ask if you would to please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. It will be followed by an invocation for council led by Council Member Wayne Griffin.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Father God, it's once again a few of your humble service and call on thy holy and righteous name. Father, I want to say thank you for all the wonderful blessings that you bestowed upon us. Father, I ask you for your blessings for this city. Father God, continue to bless it. And if you would, come be a part of this meeting. Lead, God, and direct. Please know and bless you. And ask your precious Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Ms. Duncan, do we have anybody to appear in public forum this evening?
No, sir.
With that, then, council will move to the minutes. In your packet is the December 11th council meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion that they be received.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any items of note for the clerk? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Ms. Booker.
Yes.
Mr. Dumas.
Yes.
Mr. Bettis.
Yes.
Ms. Albert. Yes. Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council departmental reports are contained in your packet. You'll see the notes from November there for you to review. Any questions can be directed to the administrator or assistant administrator for the next several weeks or to the department head. With that, council will move to a review of our City of Greer audit for last year. Mr. David Seifert has got information, and then we'll introduce Mr. Phillips, who joins us from Greer City this evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. With your permission, we'll jump back and cover the finance report real quick.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. For the period ending November 2018, we have general fund revenue reported of $3.3 million with expenditures of just over $9 million. At that amount, we are 7% under budget. One thing, just a quick note I'd like to point out on that 7% under budget is, if you'll notice on the last page of the general fund budget report, there are transfers in there which are planned transfers, as you're well aware, to help cover some of the construction activities going on. But they are unbudgeted, so those amounts that we are spending are drawing down against our percentage that we are under budget. So if you take those into account and subtract those planned but unbudgeted expenditures, the amount under budget is 8% instead of 7%. Then finally, referencing the dashboards, we have a combined negative variance of just over $8,000, and then a carrying cash balance of $10.8 million at November 30th. Moving to the hospitality fund, we have revenue that is 2% over budget of $946,000, with expenditures of $361,000, and a carrying cash balance there of $1.7 million in the hospitality fund. And lastly, for the stormwater fund, we have revenue recorded of $24,000 with expenditures of $150,000 and a carrying cash balance of $1,033,000. Any questions on that? I'd be happy to take if you have.
Thank you, sir. Council?
Okay, thank you. As we move into the audit, I would like to just introduce Mr. David Phillips, who's one of the partners with the firm Greer City LLP. So we're going to turn it over to him. He'll be presenting the audit and a summary presentation of that.
All right, great. I know this is a little bit of old information for you because we're talking about fiscal year 18 and you're already in 19 halfway through. and he was just reviewing with you recent monthly financial statement information. But what I wanted to do, you probably have received copies of the fiscal year 18 CAFR that you have, and it's pretty thick. And if I try to cover that with you, I think you'd be pretty bored. You notice I'm wearing my Clemson tie today. I don't get to wear it very often, but I had to do that today. And I noticed David had his on too, so I guess us accountants think alike maybe in some ways. But if you don't mind, what we'll do is we'll walk through this PowerPoint. We've tried to hit the high points of the fiscal year 18 year. And again, as we go through, if you have questions, please feel free to interject. Or if you want to wait to the end, we'll be glad to cover it at that time as well. All right. Well, we just want to remind you of a few things. The city's responsibility is to maintain effective internal controls. One of the things that we try to do as auditors, we're not just auditing the balances that are in your financial statements, but we do try to look at your significant controls. And if we see that there's significant weaknesses there, it's important that management finds out about it, but it's also important that you know about it. Because how can you fix something if you don't know it's broken? So again, for example, if we had come across an issue where bank recs aren't being done, that's very important to us. We would want to make sure that management's aware of it, but also that you're aware of it as well. These are your financial statements. And our responsibility is to issue opinion. But before we do that, I was talking to you about controls. They've done these case studies and looking at fraud. And what they have found is this fraud risk triangle that three things have to be present for fraud to occur. And we just like to remind our clients about once every 5 years, just so that it's before you. The first item there being that there has to be a need in somebody's life to commit fraud. I want you to think about that. So somebody's need might be that someone lost a job in their family. Maybe they have a whole bunch of medical bills in somebody's household. Maybe somebody is going to college and they don't know how to fund it. So there's a need in somebody's life. The second thing there is that they have to be able to rationalize why it's okay to commit fraud. Sometimes that rationalization is, I haven't gotten a raise in 5 years and it's not fair. Or, I work harder than Susie and Susie makes more money than me. The last item here is the only one, the opportunity is the only item that you and I can control. I can't control whether somebody has a need. I can't control whether they can rationalize whether it's okay. But I can make the opportunity so difficult, the controls hopefully are there in such a way that they're not going to want to try. Or it's in an area that is so immaterial, even if they did steal something, it's very insignificant. So that's why it's important that controls are in places, that there's checks and balances, that one person can't do everything. Okay, just a quick reminder there. So our responsibility here on this slide is to issue an opinion. We give you reasonable assurance. We don't give you an absolute assurance. The only way I can give you absolute assurance is if I looked at every single transaction that the city processed during the past year, and then that audit would cost you 10 times what you're paying today. But we give you reasonable assurance because we look at things from a materialities perspective. So we're looking at things about at 2% level. So think if you had $100, if you're missing a quarter, I'm probably not going to be able to find the quarter. And if you wanted me to do a super audit like that, it would cost a lot more money. But hopefully, if it was $5, we'd catch something like that. So again, the audit is designed in such a way so that we give you reasonable, kind of 95, 97% certainty level, like they do with statistics, and that's kind of what we're doing. So you have an unmodified opinion. I know this is kind of a weird term, but it means that we're not aware of anything that we have to modify our report for. That's why it's called unmodified. One change this year is that the stormwater fund was converted from an enterprise fund to a special revenue fund. Just because we think it's easier to follow, it's going to be just like your hospitality tax in those same areas. And it's not going to be an enterprise fund anymore. All right, well, let's look briefly at your fiscal year 18 results. Your total fund balance increased $2.7 million to 16.6. You see the chart there a little bit. There's some monies there that are non-spendable and assigned, but then we're left with the really key category, which is unassigned. And your unassigned fund balance is $16.3 million. And that's an increase from last year, which was 13.6. You're really seeing a lot of growth. And a lot of, with a strong economy, that growth is falling to your bottom line. So if you look, your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of your actual expenditures was about 83%, and that's a really strong number. The GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, they're kind of like the Bible of governments. They recommend a minimum of 2 months, which is 16.7. So you can see how you've really been able to build a really strong fund balance, and that gives you flexibility. That gives you the ability to deal with needs in the community. The city's minimum fund balance policy requires 35% of your general fund operating revenues, and if we base it on that methodology, you're at 63%. So from both metrics, you can see you're really doing well. So again, why do you want to have a strong fund balance? Well, remember, some of your revenues, property taxes, business licenses, they kind of come in all at one time. And you don't really get a lot more of those until the next year. It helps you with significant emergencies and unanticipated expenditures. It gives you flexibility. If you have to issue debt, you're going to get better rates than those entities that don't have a strong fund balance. If they see you have a good track record, you manage your affairs well, your rates are going to be better on your debt. Again, it's just important in uncertain economic times. All right, well, let's look briefly at your general fund revenues. They were $25.7 million. And then we kind of list to you the various buckets of where those revenues are, the biggest being property taxes, and then the second biggest category there being franchises and licenses. Those are really your growth revenues, that category right there. And those revenues, remember, when the economy is going well, will be where they are today. If the economy really sours, they could go down $2 or $3 million. So one thing I would always caution you is that franchise license revenue is very much economy driven. And we're having great times, but we know that they won't last forever. So we always just encourage people to be mindful that even when the good times are coming, don't get used to spending to the very max, because you could have a pullback in the economy and some of those revenues really pull back as well. As you relate your revenues to the prior year, your revenues are up $1.7 million. Or 7%. That's a really, really strong increase. And again, that's primarily due to property taxes, higher franchises, and licenses. It's not because you did a tax increase. It's just you're having growth. The economy is growing, and those revenues are very much predicated on that type of growth. As it relates to your budget, you came in $3.3 million over your budget. Or about 15%. And part of that, again, is the same areas. Property taxes, you're having a lot of growth in the community. Also, these franchise fees and licenses. And your staff, just because you got it last year, isn't going to budget, well, I think we're going to get another 5% growth next year. They're going to be a little bit conservative in their budgeting, because they don't want to all of a sudden expect something and then the economy pull back, and then you're in a bad place. All right, next slide. Let's look briefly at your general fund expenditures. They were $19.7 million. We list kind of the biggest categories there. What we generally see is public safety is always the biggest. It's usually around 45 to 55%. Your number is about $9.8 million in total dollars there. Then you see some of the other categories of general government, public service, recreation, and so forth. As it relates to the prior year, your expenditures are up $1.4 million. Or 8%, and we list the various functions where those increases were, but really the driver there is the last bullet point or paragraph on that page, just being that you have more head count. Remember, you did a wage increase, which was 1.6. You had a step increase, and just higher benefit costs. Remember the PIBA rates, the state pension plans, which we'll look at a little bit, those rates were up 2% this year. They're going to go up another 1% next year and 1% the next year. All that hits you, and you need to be able to absorb those higher costs as they come due, and that's what you're having to deal for in your budgeting there. All right, some other items on your general fund expenditures as it relates to your budget. You came in $1 million under budget, or 5%. And to me, honestly, that is the most important slide if I'm a council member. I approved a budget, I want to know, did you adhere to my budget? If you feel like you need to spend more, you need to come back to me and get us as council to approve an increase. Well, your staff, as you can see, came in significantly under budget, and that's just really adds to that fund balance that we were talking about before. Wanted to mention there in the bottom note, there's a lot of words there, just talking about a lot of the transfers that you're making out for various debt service payments, to help with capital projects and so forth. You have a lot of activity going on. And because you're being able to fund a lot of this with some internal monies, but also with the new debt that was issued recently as well. All right, let's briefly look at some of your other funds. Hospitality tax funds had approximately $1.5 million in fund balance at year end, of which $1.4 million was restricted for tourism-related expenditures, with the remaining $100,000 was assigned in the fiscal year 19 budget. We just briefly give you some of the metrics. You had $2.4 million in revenues, about $2.2 million in expenditures and transfers out, and then we list what some of those expenditures were for. $175,000 for recreation, for various festivals and so forth, some capital outlay, kind of tell you it's related to Century Park and so forth. And then we had transfers out of about 1.8. Kind of give you just a quick summary there. In your real property fund, had approximately $3.3 million in fund balance at year end, which $2.5 million was assigned for capital projects. And then some money was set aside for your fiscal year 19 budget, and then another $700,000 was restricted for capital improvements. Had revenues of about $200,000 for some miscellaneous property sales, and again, your expenditures in that fund are primarily for community development there. All right, let's look briefly at your road paving fund. Had approximately $494,000 in fund balance at year end. We list your revenues of about $120,000, a little lower than in some years because it depends on the paving money that you get from the county, of $120,000, expenditures of $164,000, which were primarily for sidewalks and paving projects, and then you transferred out $250,000 to cover some of the general capital project costs in the general fund as well. Your stormwater fund, remember how we talked about we moved that from an enterprise fund to a governmental fund, so it's very similar now to your road paving fund, your real fund, hospitality. So you have a fund balance there in the stormwater of $1.3 million, of which $300,000 was assigned in your fiscal year 19 budget to be used, and $1 million was still remaining available there, but restricted for the stormwater type of activities. You had revenues down there at the very bottom of $842,000 and expenditures of only $265,000, so you were able to kind of have some savings there as well to put away for the future. All right, back around 2015, the GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, they set all the accounting rules. They took the position that even if you don't have your own pension plan, but if you participate in a cost-sharing plan like the state retirement plan, if you're in that plan, you have to record your proportionate piece of the asset or liability related to that plan. Their position was if the state plan is underfunded, where is the state going to get that money? They're going to get it from you. And so ultimately it's your liability then, in their minds. And so you need to record your proportionate piece of that liability on your book. So this is just a quick slide to look at the South Carolina retirement system and the South Carolina police officers' retirement system. The total net pension liability, your proportionate piece, is $19.3 million. Now, the number at the state level is over $22 billion. Okay? All that's getting allocated to all the participating governments. So the city of Greenville gets its piece. The city of Malden gets its piece. The county gets its piece, and so forth. This liability increased about $800,000 over the prior year. Primarily they lowered the discount rate because they really hadn't been earning what they thought that they were going to earn in the state pension plans. That makes the liability go up. And also, they're raising the contribution rates like we talked about to hopefully begin to chip away at lowering that pension liability on the state level. If that state pension liability goes down, your proportionate piece will go down. So we just wanted to mention to you, there's a lot of note disclosures in here. If you go look at note 4B in the financial statements, there's about 8 to 9 pages telling you about what does it take to be a member of the plan? How much do you have to contribute into the plan? What are they investing in the plan? What is the pension liability on the state level? It has all types of disclosures related to that plan. All right, well, we wanted to briefly look at your government-wide statements. Now, what the government-wide statements try to do is they try to add up all your funds across the board to a total, and then they try to add all of your capital asset and your debt. So we can kind of get what the net worth of the city really is. They try to make it very similar to how a bank would do it, how a big manufacturing company would do it. So they create some comparability here. So your total assets and deferred items there were $86.9 million, of which $39.7 million is your property, plant, and equipment. So that's your buildings, that's your vehicles, and so forth. You do have $41.2 million in cash and cash equivalents, $4.7 million in deferred items, and then some other assets. Then you look at your liabilities and your deferred inflows there. They were $51.9 million. You had $28.5 million in your own debt and your own long-term obligations. But here's where that pension liability gets added. You see there $19.3 million. So that hits there. And then you have some other accruals and payables and so forth. So if you take your assets minus your liabilities, that's like your net worth. Your net position is $35 million. And so when we list the various categories there, and your unrestricted is about 3.9. Now, before that pension standard was implemented, we would have added back that we got rid of that liability, that net pension liability. Your number would have been in the 20 millions. So you can see that's where it makes your unrestricted not looking so well. We have a lot of our governments that are negative there. They're negative in the unrestricted category because the pension liabilities are so great that they eat up all the other assets. And like school district of Greenville County is $300 or $400 million in the hole. There's big numbers because their pension liability is, $800 million of what they have to add on to their books. So again, just to kind of keep that in mind, what I always encourage you is kind of look at that unrestricted, but add back those pension items because they're not really liabilities that you have to pay tomorrow. How they're going to make you pay them is by raising your rate over time. And you'll pay them, and it'll be part of your budget process that David brings to you each year. All right, well, let's briefly look at your capital assets. They were $39.7 million. They increased $2.7 million over the prior year. You had capital asset additions of $4.4 million, and we kind of list the areas there so that you can see what they are. But remember, if we add an asset like a fire truck, we also depreciate it over its estimated useful life. So your depreciation expense was $1.7 million, and so that net there is kind of what is the net change, the net increase in the capital assets for the year. You had construction in progress. Remember, this is as of June 30th, so we're not talking about as of December 31st or anything like that. Was approximately $1.4 million. It was related to ongoing costs for paving projects, for streetscape projects and parking facilities, the kennel and the Greer Station projects, and the new operational software. So you had a lot going on at year end that was probably, some of that has probably been completed as of today, but it wasn't as of June 30th. All right, let's briefly look at your long-term obligation. Now, these are your long-term. This isn't that city, the pension liability that we were talking about. These are your debt and so forth. You had $28.5 million. Balance, of which, remember, you had an increase of $12 million because, remember, you issued those new installment purchase revenue bonds this year. And a lot of that money is going to be used for all the development here within the city in the coming years. We also made principal payments of $2.7. So remember, if you borrow money, you have to make your annual mortgage payment. Your mortgage payments for principal were about $2.7 million for 2018. You issued a new lease purchase for $2.4 million, also for various vehicles and equipment. So that's kind of your debt activity for fiscal year 18. Your legal debt limit was approximately $9.8 million, for which the city had applicable outstanding debt of less than $1 million. So you have the ability to borrow without referendum or something based on your own council's decision. You could borrow up to $8.9 million without having to go to your constituents or go to a referendum. As it relates to your debt service payments for the current year we're in, You have your annual mortgage payment, maybe the best way of looking at it is about $3.8 million for fiscal year 19. All right. Good thing is we don't really see a lot of changes in the auditing standards right now that would affect the way we audit. There are some accounting changes, and I just wanted to mention that. There's something on fiduciary activities where they're wanting us to make sure that all of the various funds that you have are in the right type of fund type. And so we're going to be looking at that in the years ahead. Also, they issued a statement on leases so that if you lease property, or let's say if you wanted to rent a building, what you would used to do in the past, you would just treat that as an operating expense. Whenever you paid it, you would credit your cash, you wrote them a check, and you debit rent expense. They want you to treat all leases as debt now. So you're roughly going to treat it like a liability and an asset. And so that's going to be a change that affects the government-wide statements in a couple of years. All right, on the last tier on your compliance, we look for controls. We're kind of looking to see if there's any things that we need to make you aware of. We did not have any findings, significant deficiencies, or material weaknesses. We would also have to do a federal single audit if you expended more than $750,000 in federal money, and we didn't have to perform one of those audits because you didn't expend more than $750,000. There's a separate letter you would have received called a management letter. It's kind of like this right here. And, if there were things there that were, we had disagreements with management, or we felt like management was uncooperative or didn't want to book something that we thought that they should book, we would have to note it in this letter. There's nothing like that. The only thing we mention here, just so that you know, is that we converted that stormwater fund from an enterprise fund to a governmental fund. That's kind of all that's there. All right, last slide here. Again, you have an unmodified opinion. I know it's a strange term again, but that's the best opinion that you can get. And you really have strong financial conditions. You have the ability as a council to make a lot of choices that you can fund things internally if you want to. I wanted to thank David and Susan and them for all their help. I want you to understand it's a pain for us to be here for them. It takes a lot of their time and their effort, and they got regular stuff to do as well. So again, I just want to appreciate their staff working with us and us getting to the point where we can, issue the financials and present to you. Any questions? I know it'll go quick, but some of that because I know it's boring, so I go quick. Any questions there, Council?
Any questions of Mr. Phillips or the report that he brought to us this evening?
Going back to the state retirement fund,
Okay.
And this is an opinion about the state's financial affairs. What do you think that with that retirement fund, they have so much of a liability there that, and it seems that they don't want to take responsibility and do what needs to be done. Is there any talk, or have you heard of anything about what could happen? I know they're going to continue to raise
rates.
rates.
If that law's in place, one of the big things was, moving more to a 401k type of plan. The problem is it doesn't solve funding the $22.5 billion that's already there. If you all of a sudden say all these new people are going to be moved to a new plan, well, we're using their money to pay for the old people. So, if all of a sudden we take their money and stick it in their own, like 401k accounts, how are we going to cover all these old people then? It's kind of like Social Security, and I really would say some of what has happened is the state never made the rate what it should have been a long time ago, and now we're paying for it. So let me give you an illustration. They always tell you if you if you graduate from college, you should start saving 10% of what you make until you retire, and you'll be good. Well, what if you choose not to retire for not to save for 20 years? Well, then those last 20 years, you're going to really have to save a lot to make up for the 20 years you didn't save. That's kind of what's transpired here, that we probably did not save at the right rate for a long period of time. They didn't earn the type of performance on their investments. They really had poor returns, and they were paying some of the highest investment rates, fee rates, of any state with some of the worst performance. So they have tried to correct that in the last couple of years. Time will tell if it's totally been corrected. But so what they're doing now, we've got to increase the amount of cash money coming into the fund by raising these rates to try to make up for the shortfall at the state level. And the bad thing is you have no control over it, but unfortunately we have to report it and add it to your financials.
Others? Gentlemen, thank you for the work that you've put in. I know that we've had several meetings lately, and again, to our staff for the assistance they provided y'all in producing the report, and we appreciate all of that effort to bring us this update and insight into our financial report. So we appreciate it. Thank you. As you will note, our administrator is not with us this evening. He is out of town, and so Mr. Mike Sell, who is our assistant city administrator, joins us this evening. And so, Mr. Sell, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Just some calendar updates I'd like to provide you. One of them being off the top is the Homestown Legislative Action Day. I know that many of you have already gotten with Ms. Duncan and made plans and arrangements to attend that. That is on February the 5th. If you have not and you have a desire to go, let her know. The hotel reservation deadline for the rate is that's in place is on the 10th of this month, so that's in a couple days. So if you could let her know, if you haven't already, then she can help make arrangements for you to be there. I think registration for the actual conference, the actual day is the 22nd of January, so you have a little time to register for the conference, but to get your hotel reservations in, let her know as soon as possible. Also, I'd like to make you aware that on a week from today, January the 15th, you probably received some communications about this already. We're going to have a groundbreaking ceremony for our streetscape project in downtown. We'll meet at the Davenport for a reception, comments from the mayor and administrator, some of our officials, some of our contractors and Co-Transco who we're working with on this project. And then we'll have a groundbreaking activity that will take place outside of the Davenport as well. That starts at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, January 15th. Also, I'd like to bring to your attention that on the 18th here at the City Park, we're going to have a food truck rollout. It's one of the events that we do on every so often. It's always well attended, well received. We hope the weather holds out for us, and we have good weather for it. The way the weather's been lately, it's kind of hard to tell, but that's on the 18th from 5 to 8 here at City Park. We'll have games, music, and of course the food trucks will be here as well. One of the other things I'd like to make you aware of is that on the 21st of January, we're having our Martin Luther King luncheon here at City Hall on that Monday. Usually we gather and start at 11 a.m. for that. This year, our keynote speaker is going to be Mayor Danner, who will be speaking for us. I think Sullivan Family is going to provide entertainment, and I think South House is providing food for us that day, which is always a pretty good meal. Mr. Griffin, I don't know if you have any comments you'd like to make in regards to that day.
No, I just look forward to having the mayor speak for us. And it's always a program that takes on a life of itself, so we'll just see what happens. That's the best way I can put it.
It's always a good time, always very well attended event for us, very successful event for us. So we're looking forward to that. In conclusion, on the event reminders, please mark your calendars for the annual chamber celebration. I know some of you have already been working with Elizabeth Adams and getting, if you have an interest in attending that event, please let her know if you haven't already. That's on January 31st. I believe we still have a few seats available at our table for that event, but that starts at 6 p.m. with a reception that evening, and then we have a dinner program that the chamber puts on at 7 o'clock that night as well. So if you will just let Elizabeth know if you haven't already, if you have an interest in attending that event. As Council will note on the agenda tonight, there are 2 requests for 2 economic development matters in executive session for Council's consideration. And out of respect for our city administrator, I'm going to end the city administrator's report, but on a personal note, I'd like to add a big Go Tigers for our win last night. We'll tell him I didn't make that part of his report. He wouldn't appreciate it, but...
You already win.
But that concludes the report this evening, Mayor. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of the Assistant Administrator? We thank you, sir, for the update and the reminders on the upcoming events. As we continue on with the city's business this evening, the appointments of boards and commissions, we do have a open seat on the Recreation Association Board of Trustees for District 6. Do we have a nomination for that seat?
Yes, I do. I would like to nominate Jason Bridwell. He lives in the city, and he has done a lot of work with the Recreation Center throughout the last many years. He's had kids that have participated. He is now serving on the baseball board, but he did agree to serve on the Recreation Committee. And so I feel like he will do an outstanding job. And on that note, also, I would like to express my appreciation to Chuck Ryan that served on the board for several years for me. He did a great job, attended the meetings, and was real faithful in his service. And that was information given to me by Ann, that she really enjoyed having him on there.
Great. We'll consider that a motion then. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any questions in regards to the nominee? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Airwood?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Mayor Danner?
Yes. Council has moved to items of new business, the first of which this evening is the bid summary for the work needs to be done at the Cannon Center. Mr. Steve Grant, our city engineer, is going to make that presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Appreciate your time this evening. Staff needs to make you aware of some water leak and damage issues at the Cannon Center. And this is working great.
Looks like water to me. No.
Well, I'll keep talking while I'm working on pictures. This information and progress thus far in addressing these issues have come from several staff members and departments who collaborated on this issue, and some of them are in the audience tonight to help answer questions later. Have built official Ruth Helms and our maintenance supervisor Dan Fowler and Greg Watson of Parks and Rec. So this started a while back when we noticed somebody Cannon Center noticed asbestos stains on the wall, and while looking for the source of the water, staff discovered that roof rafters are showing some water damage. There you go. Right on cue. Roof rafters are showing some water damage. If you see these, got a few pictures just to show you here. And it's not forward. There we go. Go backwards. There's another picture. I think I got 4 pictures. You can see the wood rafters are in direct contact with the brick, which is a porous material, so the moisture appears to be wicking through the brick into the wood. This essentially means that the end of the rafters are weakening due to moisture and rot. A worst case scenario would be if they deteriorated enough that the roof structure could fail in the future. Dan's actually been up on a lift and looked at almost all the rafters, and approximately 70% of them are showing this type of staining and damage. We consulted with a local structural engineer to evaluate the issues and propose a solution. I do have a drawing here. This is a bunch of technical stuff, but in case you're interested, the proposed fix is to install steel supports at each end wall that will support the new wood rafters, which will in turn support the roof if the existing rafters were to continue to weaken. The facility does need to be empty to accomplish this work, and there is an open window of opportunity in the month of February as the facility has no scheduled events. Staff notified all local contractors of the project in addition to the normal advertising through local media and online outlets. 2 contractors attended the mandatory pre-bid meeting on December 13th, and bids were opened on December 31st with only 1 contractor submitting a bid. You have the bid summary in your package. Staff recommends the project to be awarded to I&E Specialties out of Lexington, South Carolina, in the amount of $97,750. In addition, there will be some design and testing fees, which could take the total budget up to approximately $120,000. And I think Mr. Seifert has some financial information for you.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Some time back, I would say about 8, 9, 10 years ago, we adopted some financial policies, and at that time, we stated that when it became financially feasible, that we would start funding a contingency fund. Well, 2 years ago, we actually made that first funding. Thinking back, that was a good decision back then, and that fund was specifically set up for emergencies and unplanned expenditures to take care of emergencies of these capital, like this capital nature that we're facing now with the Cannon Center. So from the financial side, if you choose to approve this bid that Mr. Grant has brought forward for us tonight, we want to recommend the funding source to you out of the contingency fund. So currently we have about $245,000 in that contingency fund, and as stated earlier, Mr. Grant said the anticipated cost for this project will be about $120,000. So that will leave about $125,000 still in that contingency fund should anything else occur during this year. And then in the budget process for 2020 is we will include in that budget to replenish that fund moving forward. So we will maintain that contingency fund at that 1% level that we have approved in the financial policies.
Thank you, sir. Any additional information, Mr. Grant?
No, sir. We'll try to entertain any questions if you have them.
Questions, council? Comments?
What's the long-term expectation of what's going to be left after this? I mean, how far down the road will we have further problems?
Well, we wouldn't anticipate any. If we can find the water, we're still working on finding the water source as well. So eliminating the water is going to be a key, but taking the bearing surface away from the bridge and getting it on the metal supports at the end will alleviate that part. So hopefully there'll be no issues.
In our inspection of the building, I mean, this is the only problem that we've uncovered at this present time that we have with the facility. We don't foresee there to be any significant amount of works council aware of done on the building several a few years ago. This particular issue has come up recently in regards to this moisture getting in. If we can obviously track down and stop the water problems, there doesn't seem to be any other structural or deficiencies in the facility.
So it's not related to the roof?
That's hard to say exactly. We haven't exactly pinpointed the source.
Is there any kind of guarantee on that work that was done?
On the roof?
We are in the process of reviewing that. The repairs have to be made. We know we have to pursue that, but yes, we are taking a look to see if we have the ability to go back and take a look at any warranty issues in regards to work that maybe should or should not have been performed at that time in order to address problems that we're experiencing. We're still in the process of doing that. But we want to get the work done so that we can, because we have to shut the building down while it's being done. We want to get it back up. It's turned out to be, very well used facility for us. So.
Others?
Council, I will assume this item needs action. I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
So motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Got a motion to proceed with the work as recommended by staff. Second, floor is open for any discussion. Further questions? Comments? Hearing none, Mr. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Mayor Danner?
Yes. Thank you, sir. Council, the first item of business this evening in terms of new business is ordinance number 1, 2019. An ordinance to provide for the annexation of properties owned by William and Marcia Johnson and Ella Sudduth Nichols located at 1689 Gibb Shoals Road and 122 Nichols Road by 100% petition and to establish a zoning classification of DRD for said property. Ms. McCormick joins us this evening to give us information in this regard.
Good evening, Mayor Danner and Council. For our first ordinance of 2019 for zoning, we have an annexation and zoning request for property located on Gibb Shoals Road in Greenville County. The parcels for annexation consist of 21.48 acres, and they may look familiar to you as these two projects were combined into one, and they've come back because this is significantly different from the previous requests. The property is still proposed for residential development with the design review district zoning as we had before, but this development will contain 85 units comprised of 47 single-family and 38 townhome lots. The Planning Commission will conduct a public hearing next Monday, January 14th for the zoning, but just to orient you with the project, just to refresh your memory, we do have 3 parcels in question, 2 that are on Gibb Shoals, and then this one which has frontage on Nichols Drive. The previous request did eliminate the home, the single-family home that's on Nichols, but since then, the developer has acquired the remainder of that lot and does wish to develop in that area. There's our current zoning map that shows DRD, and then the white going through the property is the floodplain. Our future land use map has this as a residential land use 3 community, and there is the site. So while this property does have 85 units requested, again, half of those are single family and the other half are townhomes. The main entrance will be off of Gibb Shoals Road. They do have emergency access to Nichols Drive, and they also have an emergency access into Suddeth Farms to the adjacent south, as well as a pedestrian connection through one of the cul-de-sacs to that development. They are proposing 2.25 acres of meaningful open space. We're starting to see that defined differently than gross open space, which is provided at 7 acres. The difference is that you have a lot of undevelopable land, and they are setting aside about 20% of their developable land as open space. Some pocket parks throughout the neighborhood, and then, of course, where they have their mail kiosk, they're counting that as part of that developable open space. I think that's all that I have right now. I'd be glad to take any questions or answer any more of your comments or concerns.
Where would the entrances be? I know there's a couple in the at the meeting here that has expressed concern. They live on Circle Drive.
Okay, I'm going to pull up that for you so you can see that specifically. One moment, and I'll just bring up and show you exactly where those are. Takes a minute to do without a mouse. Okay, so the main entrance will be located here. Obviously, this is approved on Gibb Shoals Road. And then this is the milk kiosk and the first pocket park, and then the 2 others there. And then they have an emergency shown in the cul-de-sac, the first cul-de-sac to your right. And then that brown is the sidewalk going through that will have a connection into Suddeth Farms. And then there's an emergency access only shown on Nichols. Typically, when you have over the number of units that they're proposing, even over 30 to 40 lots, we like to see 2 entrances, at least 1 main entrance and then a second for emergency access. They actually have shown 2 emergency access points, and then also that pedestrian connection. Okay. So the only vehicular traffic you should see there should be onto Gibb Shoals Road.
I know they had mentioned something about the fire department uses Circle Drive to get into the fire department, and so they were kind of concerned about the access there and with the other subdivision, building up, and what chaos it may cause with going in there.
Both of those developments, this one, if adopted, Blaze Ridge, and then Suddeth Farms to the south, do not have any pedestrian nor vehicular access on the circle. Those are all coming off of 14, Suber, and Gibb Shoals into new city streets.
By show of hand, is the owner of the property or representative of the owner of the property with us this evening? Thank you. Let the record show that two folks indicated so. Are you available for questions if they come up in regards to the project?
Yes.
Okay. Council, I entertain a motion to receive for further discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion. Questions? Comments? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Earwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, second item before us this evening is the first reading of ordinance number 2-2019. This is an ordinance to provide for the annexation of properties owned by Michael G. Mike Frost, located on Leicester Road by 100% petition and to establish a zoning classification of I-1 for said property. Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Mayor Danner. For our next ordinance this evening, it is an annexation and zoning request for property located on Lister Road in Spartanburg County. There are 3 parcels for annexation, and they consist of 10.17 acres. The property is proposed for industrial development with an I-1 zoning, and the Planning Commission will conduct a public hearing on January the 14th, next Monday, for the zoning of these parcels. Just to orient you to the area, this is Lister Road, and then crossing there is James Smith Parkway or Highway 80, so this is directly off of that. There's your zoning and floodplain map. There's no floodplain adjacent to this property. That hatched area is the airport environs, for reference. This is at the very top of the airport environs area. Your future land use map designates the majority of the area as residential land use 2, and that is what currently looks like on the property. Of course, it's hard to capture 10 acres in a picture, but you can sort of see what we have there. I'll be glad to take any questions that you have.
By show of hand, is the owner of the property or representative of the owner of the property with us this evening? Let the record indicate that someone said they were here. Are you available for questions if they become available during this discussion? With that, then, I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion. Questions? Comments? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Earwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Next item for our consideration this evening is ordinance number 3-2019. This is an ordinance to provide for the annexation of property owned by Elizabeth Glenn Staton, located on Lister Road by 100% petition and to establish a zoning classification of I-1 for said property. Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Mayor Danner. Ordinance 3 is an annexation and zoning request for property on Lister Road. It is 1.25 acres proposed for industrial development with an I-1 zoning, and the Planning Commission will conduct a public hearing on January the 14th, this coming Monday, for the zoning of this property. It will look somewhat familiar to you. This is the middle piece that is surrounded by the former parcel we just heard in the previous ordinance, and it is this parcel here. Again, a portion of that is in the airport environs area. And we have our zoning map. So the contiguity for this is based upon the previous ordinance. And that is what that parcel looks like currently. That's all I have at this time, Mr. Mayor.
By show of hands, is the owner of the property or representative of the owner of the property here? Are you willing to speak in regards to questions about this parcel? Thank you, sir. Record will indicate so. Entertain a motion to receive.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion. Questions? Comments? Hearing none, Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Earwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Council, the last item of new business we have before us this evening is the first reading of ordinance number 4-2019. This ordinance is approving an agreement between the city and BMW Manufacturing Company, LLC, BMW North America, LLC, and SP Acquisitions, LLC, collectively referred to as BMW, regarding the city's business license fee and the inclusion of real property in a multi-county business or industrial park and other matters related thereto. We are joined this evening by Michael Slorick, an attorney that works with the city on a regular basis in regards to these types of items, and he will bring us information in regards to ordinance number 4-2019 this evening. Sir, the floor is yours.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Like everyone else, I am tired because I also stayed up to watch the football game. So I will try to be at least as brief as the accountant was. He's gone, so I can make fun of him. Effectively, this agreement really memorializes what the city has been doing in regard to BMW property for as long as BMW has been here. I will essentially hit what I think are the four sort of highlight bullet points, and obviously I'd be happy to take any questions. What this does is, again, memorialize that the current property that is either owned or leased by BMW is inside the multi-county industrial park, which, by the way, has already been done. In fact, I think the city council did an ordinance for Spartanburg County at their request at the last meeting or the meeting before that. So this is essentially just recapitulating that those properties that are currently owned or leased by BMW are in the multi-county park that involves Spartanburg County. It also goes further to say that the city will work in good faith with BMW in the future if additional parcels are purchased or leased by BMW. It does not commit the city to actually put those parcels in a multi-county park. It simply says that the city will work in good faith with BMW to do that. The other two items, excuse me, relate to the city's business license ordinance, which of course was adopted recently, amended recently to make some changes for some of your largest business license fees payers, of course BMW being one of them, if not the highest. It essentially does two things. One of them is, once again, it simply confirms what the city has always done, which is that it treats BMW like any other business entity who is located in or not located in the city. Obviously, if it's property that's not located in the city and activities that are not located in the city, then there is no business license paid to Greer. For those properties and activities located in the city, then there would be a business license paid to Greer. And again, the agreement literally says that well, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but it says that Greer will essentially treat BMW like it treats any other city resident in terms of business license. And then the second thing that it does with respect to the business license is that it suggests that the city council would keep the current business license ordinance in effect throughout the life of this agreement. Obviously, BMW recognizes that the agreement cannot bind a future council. Hence, there is a limitation that says to the extent permitted by law. However, it is BMW's wish that the city, even future councils, would obviously keep the business license ordinance as it is now, having been recently amended to cover, again, some of these very high-paying business license folks. And again, those are kind of the highlights. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council, floor is open.
How much does BMW pay the city in business license fees?
That I do not know. I don't know. You have to ask the numbers guy.
To date, they are not paying. We've been working with the business license amendment that we passed last year, and then with this agreement that we're bringing tonight, we've been working with BMW for about a year and a half on this. So to date, we haven't received any business license from them. We were waiting for all this to get settled. But when they do start paying, the bulk of their business is not going to be in the city. BMW manufacturing is not in city limits. So these are going to be some of their smaller warehouses where they're moving parts, in and out. So there's not going to be a large revenue flowing through these facilities yet. We do not know what the future will hold, but for the plans that we know today, the revenue of those facilities are not going to be very large.
So why do they want this agreement for 20 years?
The best that I can explain is that this is really just a memorialization of what the city has been doing. As I said,
Well, let me stop you right there. We haven't been doing anything for BMW. The only difference we've had with BMW in history is that BMW shunned Greer. They didn't want to pay taxes. So, I don't understand this agreement.
I mean,
That would be memorialized.
That would be memorialized.
I'm hesitant to give legal advice in open session, but what I will say is I think this agreement is more of a handshake between two people trying to have normalized relations rather than anything that the city is giving up or getting in exchange for giving something up.
So there was a similar agreement signed in 1993 or so?
Not that I'm aware of.
No? So this is not a continuation of something that's been in effect?
I'm suggesting that it's a continuation of the way that the city treats BMW from a business license perspective and with respect to placing properties in multi-county park. Typically, it's Spartanburg County's request. Those things have been done by the city council repeatedly since BMW has been located nearby. It's simply now we're putting that on paper.
So they've had the multi-county park
Yes, sir.
for a number of years,
That has been in existence.
but there's no
since
Greer properties in there, right?
There are Greer properties in that multi-county park, yes, sir.
Okay, and I'm confused.
And the advantage to that for them is what?
There are two advantages. One is a local property tax advantage, that is, they can get certain revenue credits, special source revenue credits or infrastructure credits in addition to fee in lieu of tax. And I'm happy to go into those weeds if you'd like, but I'll stop there.
Let's stop right there for a minute. Reno, if you would please join us, Mr. Deaton, if you would please join us and remind council, this is a conversation that's been ongoing. In fact, we discussed it somewhat at our last meeting about the business license fee and the declining scale that we've got on that, in that regard, and the need for that. Not necessarily related to BMW, but their suppliers and others. And to Jay's question about those parcels that are located in that multi-industrial part, they're fairly small, isolated holes within their footprint on the campus. Correct?
Yeah, I think as Mr. Clark has indicated, over time, Greer has amended its business license fee to give a different treatment to those business licensing producers who produce on a large scale. That declining balance, that cap that you put in place for both manufacturers and distributors. As Mr. Clark has indicated, this agreement simply memorializes that for any of the operations that would then expand onto City of Greer properties that are identified in multi-county industrial park, that same treatment would apply. That's part of the topic.
So why would we redo something that we've already done before? That when I first saw this, my first question was why? Because if we already do it for everyone, why do we need to do it specifically for BMW?
I don't know that I can answer that on behalf of BMW or any other entity who's not here represented this evening. But only I can emphasize, as Mr. Clark has indicated, that what you're being asked to do is simply to memorialize those ordinances that are already in place as it might pertain.
So what properties are in a multi-county industrial park that we have approved that BMW owns?
Yeah, I think they're Ports Authority owns most of those properties, but there are properties that are tangential, adjacent to the existing manufacturing facility that are currently unoccupied in any building that are inside Greer city limits.
BMW owns those?
They lease the Ports Authority. Yeah, they typically lease those properties.
And if I may, the second reason why folks want their property in multi-county industrial park is there's a state job development credit. There's an additional $1,000 that comes back from the state for each job created if the property is located in a multi-county industrial park. So that's not an additional benefit that the city or county is giving up. It's simply something that the state is giving up. The idea behind that is by partnering with an adjoining county, you're, in theory, spreading that wealth out to the adjoining county, not just the host county for the project. Hence, the state is willing to give that additional credit back to the job creation entity.
Others?
My questions are like Jay's. I don't know why you need to memorialize something, that's just the natural course of what we do for all businesses of their size.
Well, the main thing I got out of it was that BMW just wanted to kind of ensure, because it is such a big company and it's a foreign, owned by German, that they just wanted to be treated as other businesses were treated. That's the gist of what I got out of it, that because they were such a big company, that they wanted the fair and equal treatment that any other company would get. I may have read that wrong, but that was what I got out of it.
And that is the explanation that we've received. We had another meeting probably 2 weeks ago with one of their local, I think, deputy or assistant general counsel with their outside economic development council and with one of their representatives. And that is the explanation that was given, that there does not appear to be anything nefarious behind this. I certainly can't vouch for them. I represent the city, not them. But it's my understanding the way that the negotiations sort of went back and forth, and the explanation was this is simply a means of ensuring that as sort of the biggest gorilla, that all of a sudden Greer doesn't say, oh, well, now you've located some property in our city limits, we're going to start treating you differently than we would treat any other industry locating in the city limits.
But how can we do that if we already have governing regulations that say we treat business A the same as business A1 because they do the same amount in revenues and employment and things like that?
I don't think it would be proper for the city to do that. That is, I think you should be treating all of your industries of a similar class the same way.
Exactly. So that comes back to my why. And well, it could be, but BMW, to me, that's an issue of trust.
Has there been some, are they fearful of some indication, or that we've made a move that, I mean, we've obviously a year ago we bowed down and passed an ordinance that benefited them greatly, So I don't understand really the need for us to get a pat on the back and a handshake and say, yeah, buddy, we're there with you.
And as Mr. Deaton said, I'm not sure that either of us can describe what's in sort of the mind of the representatives of BMW. We're sort of, this is what the agreement is in terms of what they're being asked, or what council's being asked.
Well, you're correct. By law, we can't bind other councils to a degree. But, I mean, there are, what would be a default under this agreement?
There, again, it's from a very legalistic point of view, this agreement is really more of a memorialization of normalized relationships. I'm not sure there would be a default unless you were, for example, violating state law and discriminating against them, interpreting your business license ordinance, for example, differently simply with respect to BMW than you would with respect to any other similarly situated business license fee payer.
Well, but let me throw this what-if scenario out. Bad things start happening, the economy tanks, revenues, of course, tank, and we have to balance our budget. And if the only way we can balance the budget is increase our revenues coming in, which could be increasing business license fees, which would mean, okay, we're looking at everything, and even that sliding scale. This is how this has got to be done in order for us to continue operating. And we say, this is it. BMW says, well, you're not being, what is the terminology used here? It's where we're not negotiating in good faith. They could say that, and then deep pockets of BMW could force our hand because we have this special agreement with BMW.
I don't think they're asking for anything different than what we would do for anybody else.
No, I think it's there again, just saying that everybody would be treated fairly.
Why don't we do an agreement like this for every other business?
you know, I don't know, other than the fact that, and there are a lot of other foreign businesses located here, and we're grateful for those companies to be locating here.
Well, I am too, but foreign has nothing to do with it.
No, I know, but with BMW, and they make such, their income is so big that, you know, I think that they might
have to pay
think...
a proportionate tax like Joe's Bar and Grill.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, and they're saying to be treated fairly, just like you would treat any other. I don't think it's any big deal. I mean, to me, it just sounds like it's just you treat me like you're gonna treat them.
Okay,
That's all I say.
Let's do that then. Let's go back to 1993 when they came to this city. I believe that was the year. And Wayne probably can confirm this, but I was there the day they announced. And when they announced, a reporter from a local newspaper said, or asked the question to the then, he was the head of BMW North America, Precious Sweet, or whatever his last name was. And he said, the question was, you're going to impact this city more than any other place in the state or in the U.S. I know that you have been having discussions with the city because the city wants you to be a part of them. And what are your intentions? Because at that time it hadn't been done. Any agreement hadn't been finalized. The words, and I'll quote, "We don't want to communicate through the press, but I can guarantee you we want the same things that the city of Greer wants." Now you tell me where that plant sits now. It sits in, if Spartanburg and if BMW has anything to do with it, it sits in Spartanburg, not Greer. It doesn't sit in the city limits. Now, hey, they brought lots of business, but if the city had not fought the state, Spartanburg County, and BMW, we wouldn't have half of what's going on down there now. And for them to come to us and ask for a special agreement because we don't think we'll get treated fair, well, that's a problem. Because we treat everybody fair. And to me, that's just a slap in the face of we don't trust you. We want to get this down again.
Well, what prevents a future council from taking action?
It doesn't, but why should we do something for them?
Because they come to us in good faith.
Yes, well, the thing is, I mean, BMW coming here made this city grow.
Well, let me correct you on that.
I mean, it grew.
It helped increase the
8,000
growth.
employees?
It helped increase the growth, but the city was already growing. That's one of the reasons we had such a big issue, because we didn't want BMW to stop the growth from going on across I-85. That's why we have special legislation that says if there are properties that touch BMW, it's like they're contiguous with the city limits, and therefore we can annex. That's why we have Highway 80. All of that was because of that, and the city got tough. And since then, you know, it's grown. I get it. But why should we help somebody that's not trying to help us?
So how are we really helping them? I don't see how you're saying how are we going to help them? We're not really helping them. We're just kind of agreeing to treat them
We are
equally.
giving them an in that if they don't like what we say, if another council wants to change something, we're giving them an in for them to say, you're not negotiating in good faith. You're in violation of this agreement. We're going to sue you. Now, we all know what happens when we get sued, because we went through it with the property at Allen Bennett. Deep pockets rule. We don't have the deep pockets that BMW does.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And so we would have to capitulate back to this agreement and to that
It's still saying treat us like you're treating everybody else.
It most certainly does. We don't have anybody that I know of, no business where we say that if these business license fees, that if business doesn't like them, that we increase them or decrease them, that we have to go and negotiate in good faith to come up with some sort of settlement. We don't have that. We don't have any kind of agreement unless I'm totally, unless I'm totally missing it, we don't have an agreement like this for any other business.
Well, this is I just want to say something, not trying to get between you, but I was just kind of reading through this, and it seems like this is an unusual arrangement, obviously, that we have with B&W, I would agree. And I think that they recognize that too, and I think they're starting to see that they're growing inside the city, and I think what this agreement's trying to do is to protect them, to say, we have small little chunks inside the city, and as we grow, more and more chunks may come into the city, and we don't want you to be able to come in and grab everything from all of the other parts of our business that aren't operating in the city.
Well, we can't, but law dictates that, how we can and cannot apply business license fees. That's already set in stone. We cannot do anything that the law says we can't do. I mean, if you are a contractor in the city, the way the business license ordinance reads is you pay a flat rate plus for the work you do inside the city. You aren't charged with for work you do outside the corporate limits. So if we had a huge construction company come in, that would be like a huge construction company coming in and saying, well, we want to be treated the same, and therefore here's this agreement. But if we don't like it, if we don't like the way you're treating everybody, including us, then you have to negotiate with us in good faith to come out with something we think is proper. I mean, we treat everybody the same. I just don't see, I tell you what I see, you talk about being treated the same. I don't see that we've been treated anyway by B&W. We don't have any kind of history of treating one business or another differently. So I just don't get it.
Okay, well, let me ask you, if in this little complex, and B&W comes up, sets a little business up there, would the license tax be based on the business that's going on in there? Or would the license tax be based on BMW's? Do you see what I'm asking?
It would depend on what the business operation is. We
Yeah.
have the classification
Right,
rates in
right.
place,
See,
and if it's
that's what I was
logistics,
saying.
it would pay at this rate.
Right,
If it's
right.
manufacturing, it would be
So
at this.
I think maybe that's what they're kind of governing too, to make sure we open up, we're gonna do this little shop right here. We want to have our business license based on this little shop, not based on our big B&W.
Correct.
Empire.
The other consideration is, and again, I'm speaking very colloquially, how you book the revenue. That is where you're effectively accounting for the revenue and where it's generated, which is the same for all businesses. So if you've got multiple locations, even though some of your operation may be in a particular area, the revenue may not be accounted for coming out of that location. It may be somewhere else. I think that is the other consideration that they may have, to your point. If we have something inside the city limits that is a small warehouse, for example, the city should be able to use that to then go capture all of BMW North America and every vehicle that BMW North America manufactures and what that revenue is, and then charge a business license fee based on that.
Right.
David, how do we determine what they're doing inside these locations in the city? I mean, is that what this active negotiation is all about?
I do believe so, yes, sir, that, we first look at the facility or activities that are occurring within the city limits. So I'm going to speak in terms of a facility. In some of the areas where in this one of the county industrial park where the ports authority is, the city limits cuts through parcels. So in theory, a building could be half in the city and half outside the city. So in that scenario, we would, for means of a calculation, we would capture all of the activities and revenue associated with the full facility, with them prorated by square feet or some other agreed upon method, typically would do kind of like a square feet of if half is inside the city, half is out, then we would only charge a fee on half of that revenue. That's our typical methodology for applying the fees to something that would be split. If the full facility is in this case where a full warehouse may be in, but a much larger manufacturing facility may be outside the city, we would only capture the operations of just that smaller warehouse facility inside the city limits.
In a warehouse where they only stored product, would there be an income attributable to that storing of a product?
Yes, sir. In facilities that do not have any revenue that flows through by means of sales.
Right.
The state law and our business license ordinance allows us to assess a fee on that facility. And the way we do that is if the facility is up and operational, there are obviously operational costs that go along with that facility, using the theory that a business would not have that facility, but for the business, then we assess revenue to that facility in an equivalent amount of that center as an operational expenditure facility. Right? So if their expenditures to run that facility are $200,000, we would assess an equal amount of $200,000 of revenue to that facility and then charge the fee, business license fee based on that assessment.
We have mechanisms set up to check those figures.
Yes, sir.
Let me say one other thing. This is kind of backwards from what we normally do. In just a minute, we're going to be, our agenda asks us to go into executive session to discuss economic development projects because the developer or the owner, they want a little bit of something from us. And we base those decisions we base our decision on what kind of impact it will have on our city. We don't just do an agreement and then say, here, y'all, you take this and y'all come on. That's what this is. This is saying, well, we want to be treated special. We don't trust you. Because they're not, and I don't think they're being upfront telling us what they're doing with these other parcels. I mean, why else would you, unless you were planning on something big, you wouldn't come and ask for an economic development agreement, which that is.
I think they're just maybe planning on adding a bunch of little type businesses out.
Okay, well, why do they need this agreement?
To make sure that we don't look at the big complex up there.
Did you not just hear what he said? He said we don't do that. We can't do that by state law.
I know, but it's just like, yeah, different companies operate in different ways, and sometimes with BMW being the company that it is, they probably would like some type of assurance, and I don't see that it's not trusting us.
They want 20 years, they want some stabilization to make plans for the future. I understand that. What I would like to see in this agreement is, yes, we're going to play good, we're going to be good citizens, and we're going to do everything in good faith, but I would like it explained to them that while we're signing this for 20 years, we're not able to guarantee that we won't have to tinker with some of the current agreements. I think we should tell them that up front, rather than accepting their language as it is in the agreement. By the way, who is SB Acquisitions? Is that some real estate arm or something?
I believe there's just a sister affiliated company at BMW.
What drew BMW in to ask for this? They just want to sit around one day and say, hey, we need to go to Greer and do this.
No, again, just as you indicated, Councilman Bettis, the majority of the discussion in this agreement has been thoroughly negotiated by Michael and Mr. Greer on behalf of the city and representatives of the company. The discussions were about, as you've indicated, to stabilize for the future, to make sort of space for planning for whatever may come our way. There are no impending projects. We're not working on something specific. I'm not about to unveil a cool project name for anyone. Just sort of planning for the future and how we deal with that as it might come our way.
How long has the negotiation been going on?
Some period of time.
And Mr. Driggers was part of the
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Now, I missed several meetings, but when was that authorized by ordinance for the administrator to enter into an agreement? Or to negotiate on behalf of the city?
This has been in the works for,
Well, when did we vote? Did we have to take action on that coming out of executive session?
no.
Mayor, if I might add, I know we can't discuss what happens, your discussions in executive session, but I can assure you Mr. Driggers has updated council regularly relative to the progress of this discussion.
There was discussion at our last meeting about this, in our last executive session.
No, I don't think so. I don't remember BMW's name coming up at all. Did it?
Yeah, I would have to differ with what you just said. I don't know that we've been updated on this at all. As it
Well,
went along.
I'm gonna tell you what I think. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill. I think the first thing that we need to do is what has BMW done for the city, and that's been brought up tonight. And I think if you look at the totality of the whole thing, BMW's been good for the city.
Amen.
And why don't they trust? I know why they don't trust, because I was here when we annexed them.
That's right.
Annexed them forcibly. You know what I'm saying? And I don't blame them for wanting to get some kind of, I mean, what stops a future council from coming in like that council I was on at that time, where we just forcibly annexed them? You know?
Nothing, and this agreement doesn't stop.
Well, I know, but it says we appreciate you, you know, and I think overall we do appreciate them, because not only does the upstate eat off BMW, the whole state eats off BMW. I mean, we've done a lot more for a lot less. You know, we passed it, and we give them breaks.
Shouldn't we just be a proclamation
No,
then, rather than an ordinance?
Don't we pick and choose who we give breaks to now?
Yeah, we
do.
We do.
We do, and that's what I'm saying, and if we pick and choose who we give breaks to, I think this is a good choice, because I'm looking at what are you doing for the community. They provide a lot of good jobs, you know what I'm saying, and those jobs buy a lot of houses in the city, they pay a lot of tax dollars back to the city. I mean, there's other companies that we can be fussing and fighting with, don't provide us nothing but heartache.
Well,
It's true. There's some that don't provide us nothing but heartache, but they've been good, all in all, you know, and the city's benefited from them. And not only has the city benefited from them, the city's people has benefited from them, which is why we're here in the first place, is to represent our people. Now, if they were a company that came in and just ran roughshod, didn't do anything, you know, for the city, you know, that they've helped in a lot of our charity events and a lot of things that they brought their power to good for this city. You know, they were involved with Kids Planet and a lot of other things. You know, and I know what you're saying there, but I think that we got to look at it as a whole, whether they've been good to the city or they've been bad to the city. You know, and if we come to the conclusion that they're good to the city,
Okay.
Ms. Duncan, do we have a motion on this? I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Floor is open for any further discussion.
I agree that BMW's presence has created jobs. It has created income. There's a lot that it's created. But it's not because they have been a part of the city. They have, instead of trying to be a part of the city, they have fought the city. And now they're asking us, and I agree, everything they've done is good. We haven't done anything to them that says that we're going to treat you differently than we treat anyone else.
I think we did do some.
No.
Forcible annexation.
That's forcible.
I think somebody was sitting down there.
That's forcible annexation.
That's ancient history.
That's right.
No, it's still history though. And you said it's history, and you said, well, what would make them think of something like that? It's the history. Somebody was down there that remembers that.
I doubt it.
Oh, I bet it is. You have been so, there's too many dollars involved, so somebody not remember that. But all I'm saying, that is ancient history. That's gone, but I'm saying, as a whole, now BMW's been a good partner with us.
And I don't think they're
They've
asking
been
us
good,
for any
and they've been good for
recommendations in
our
this.
citizens.
They're not. They're
They've
just
been good.
asking us to treat them like we treat anybody else.
It's the type of company that I wouldn't want to run off.
No,
I wouldn't want to run them
I don't want to
off.
run them off, and I want to treat them fairly, just like we do everybody else.
Well, it's,
I'm
you
just-
don't
I'm just
treat
wondering why we
everybody.
gotta do it this way.
We do not treat everybody fairly. We don't treat everybody fairly because everybody's not the same. BMW is not the same as a small company in the city because it brings much more to the table.
And they've got a lot of concessions.
Yeah, and for good, because you still can't measure what they meant to this community. That was the argument from the start, is that we never should have did a thing for BMW, you know. But when you measure what they brought, not only to the upstate, but to the whole state of South Carolina, that was some of the best tax dollars this state ever spent.
Why did BMW leave Germany, their home country, and come here? That's not germane to that. That's not germane to that. We're talking about being disingenuous.
You know why. With the city's better off because of BMW.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, well, it is. And your constituents are better off because of BMW.
We've got Mr. Dumas has called the question. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Harewood,
No.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
No.
Ms. Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, thank you, sir.
And like old times.
Council executive session, we've got two matters to discuss this evening, an economic development matter in regards to a project and then another economic development matter. I will entertain a motion to receive the first.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to enter into executive session to discuss an economic development matter pertaining to Project O'Hare as allowed by state statute, section 30-47085.
Comes as a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Harewood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a second motion to enter into executive session to discuss an economic development matter pertaining to Project Excel as allowed by state statute, section 30-47085.
Comes as a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Harewood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, we stand in executive session. Council, in executive session, we consider an economic development matter. This was a motion to enter into executive session to discuss an economic development matter pertaining to Project O'Hare as allowed by state statute 30-4-7, section 85. We've taken no action in that regard. We've also considered an economic development matter, which was a motion to enter into executive session to discuss an economic development matter pertaining to Project Excel as allowed by state statute, section 30-4-70A5. Taking no action in regards to that. I'll entertain a motion that we come out of executive session.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
A motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Harewood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Stand adjourned.